Thank you, guys. We are now going to the Q&A part of the evening. Don Smith, big Bitcoin bear. Do you have the first question to ask? Take it away, Don. Yeah, hand it back to yeah.
Thanks, guys. It was a good debate. I wanted just to point out, I looked up the definition of a fiat currency. And it's a currency that's not backed by anything tangible. And a commodity currency is a currency that's backed by something tangible or a commodity. So I think it's kind of funny that we're debating how bad fiat currency is when Bitcoin, by definition, is a fiat currency. The other thing I would point out, so by definition, you have to vote no on the debate. I also point out that you can't really buy anything with a fiat, with Bitcoin right now, to speak of. I mean, there's a few places, but and when people talk about hiding money or avoiding taxes, well, anytime you want to buy something, you still got to run it through a bank. I mean, when you sell your Bitcoin, where you have the cash sent to, it's got to go to a bank somewhere. So I don't think it's a very effective way of hiding money. Or I don't even know why criminals would use it, because they have to run it through a bank. So maybe you can explain that to me. I'd like to tell a story. I have a friend who, his wife came in and he said, honey, I didn't want to tell you this, but about 7 years ago, I took all the money out of our piggy bank and I bought Bitcoin. And he said, really? He said, yeah. And it just hit 19,000. And we want the good news. The good news is we're worth $70 million. And he couldn't believe it. She said, the bad news is I don't know where the code is to get the money. And to this day, I keep asking him, did you ever find the code? And he hasn't found it.
It's a true story, Don, right?
That's a true story.
It's a true story, yeah.
And so I want to know, where'd that $70 million go? I mean, who got it? And the other thing is, how do you, what's that? How do you, a Bitcoin does take a lot to manufacture. I mean, you got to buy semiconductor parts. You got to use a lot of electricity. So you can spend a lot of money to create wealth, except when you're done, there's nothing tangible. So you spend money to get rich.
Okay, Don,
so I get it.
Okay,
all right,
guys,
so that's it.
Don, you asked some very good questions. With all due respect, I want to make one point, Don. The resolution reads that Bitcoin will eventually replace government's fiat money. That's the wording of the resolution. So it's government's fiat money we're talking about in this particular case, for what that's worth. Thank you for your questions, okay. Don. I think most of these challenges, look, you love Don, okay, Peter, but most of these questions are challenges to Eric. So Eric, you get first response. Go ahead.
Yeah.
Thank you, Don.
Testing.
Yeah.
Is this on?
Yes, it's on. Yeah.
Okay. So, regarding your friend, that's really tragic. I mean, if you want to know where that money went, it went to buy us all of our Lambos. Actually, in reality, the freedom that people actually get and the sovereignty over their money that they get with crypto comes with responsibility. Losing that code was that person's responsibility, and it really sucks. But this is why it's important to educate people on how to use Bitcoin instead of getting distracted by things like the price. Second, you mentioned your definition of fiat being something that's not backed by a commodity. I wonder if you get your definition of inflation also from that same dictionary, because I'm guessing that it's wrong. Fiat actually means value by decree. It comes from anything that is valuable in a marketplace because some legal reason causes it to be valuable. Dollars are fiat now. When dollars were backed by gold, they were not fiat. Bitcoin's value, even if you think it is the most speculative and stupid investment in the universe, that value does not come from any decree. It comes from its desirability in an open marketplace. Bitcoin is absolutely not fiat. Next, you say that Bitcoin is not backed by anything. That's because Bitcoin itself is a commodity. Gold is also not backed by anything. It itself is a commodity that people will find useful for one thing or another. Bitcoin is the same, and people will find it useful for one thing or another. So I think I addressed your main points on that.
Yeah, my couple of points on it. On when it comes to fiat money, I mean, what Bitcoin has in common with fiat is even though a government didn't decree it as money, there's no law that requires anybody to accept it. What stands behind it is confidence and faith. That you certainly share a lot of confidence and faith in Bitcoin and its future. But I would argue that as a raw commodity, it has no actual utility, which brings me to a good point that I didn't get a chance to raise, and that is the incredible amount of resources in the form of energy that is required to create a Bitcoin. I mean, one of the arguments that people can have against a gold standard is that look at how expensive it is to get gold out of the ground. And then if we're just going to stick it in another hole in the ground and no one's going to see it or use it, it's an expensive way to run the monetary system. Now, I think those costs are small compared to the benefits of having sound money versus all the losses imposed by the fiat system. But if you're going to go to a cryptocurrency, at least find one that doesn't cost anything to create. I mean, why have to spend? It actually costs more money to mine a Bitcoin than an ounce of gold. And at least if I take that ounce of gold out of a vault, there is real value there. There's something I can do with that gold. I didn't waste all the resources mining it out of the earth. But the Bitcoin, once this Bitcoin bubble pops, all the electricity that was used to create those Bitcoins was a complete waste. We didn't get anything of value from all those valuable resources that were expended. And you mentioned William Shatner. What William Shatner is doing, he's got a power plant. And what he's doing is selling the power to the Bitcoin miners. He's not mining them himself. He's just selling these guys power so that they can keep on making Bitcoins. But eventually, the whole thing crashes, and no one's going to mine a Bitcoin if it costs whatever $6,000 to mine one, and they're only selling for $1,000 or $500. Then I guess the mining shuts down until the cost comes down.
Thank you, Peter. Again, I want to tell the audience that for a very special reason, that resolution says it will eventually replace government's fiat money. Now Erik is implying that's a redundancy, so to speak, but I meant to put that word in precisely to finesse this issue of fiat money. It's government's fiat money, so that you are still voting on a robust resolution. It will replace government's fiat money. But moderator's prerogative to ask you a question, Peter. The argument is about the value of gold is that first, it trades as a monetary metal, just as Bitcoin trades as a monetary currency. But second, in the case of gold, if it no longer traded as a monetary metal, if there was no demand for it as such, it would collapse in price because its value as an ornamental industrial metal is quite limited. So that 90% of the reason for gold's price is exactly the same as the reason for Bitcoin's price. Could you respond to that?
Well, I would disagree. I mean, first of all, I don't know how you can ascertain that 90% of gold's value comes from its use as money when hardly anybody uses it as money today.
It trades as a precious monetary metal.
Right.
It responds, that's how it trades. That's the argument.
Well, but that's not what it's being utilized for today. I believe
that's how its price trades.
No,
that's how it trades.
I don't know how it's traded. I mean, it's not traded for that. It's traded just.
Peter Schiff does not know how gold trades.
Don't know
that's a scandal. Bear that in mind.
If somebody
he doesn't know.
If somebody is buying gold, you don't know. I mean, you have a lot of industry people in there that are in the gold market trading. But I would say that if gold was priced as money right now, it would be priced a lot higher than $1,250
I didn't say
an ounce.
that, Peter.
It might be $10,000 an ounce. Right now, gold is basically priced for jewelry. It's not priced as money. It's not being circulated as money. It's not being saved. Central banks have some gold, but they probably have less gold now than they've ever had in their history. So I don't think there's much of a monetary premium currently built into the price of gold.
Peter just made a fascinating statement about gold. We might have a debate about that. Gold trades as jewelry.
It trades as a commodity. It is not being.
It doesn't trade as a precious metal. Okay.
It is not being traded right now as money.
Okay, we have to
and people are, portfolio managers aren't buying it as insurance. Nobody owns gold, right? If they want insurance, they use derivatives or they use something else.
Okay, you may just have one final question from the moderator, from my moderator's prerogative, and now, sorry, having to do with the degree to which the government can enforce its will with respect to gold or with respect to Bitcoin. The question for Erik, especially, Peter said that despite the fact that I think he sort of concedes, the government can seize gold. It did under Roosevelt. Gold was unlawful to own, and of course, obviously, it's difficult to hide gold wherever. It is obviously a physical commodity, much more vulnerable. But on the other hand, Peter said, well, but they can say to banks, everybody, look, you get caught trading Bitcoin, 20 years in prison. What about that?
Yeah, well, the government could absolutely outlaw Bitcoin.
Yeah.
It's not
Just as easily as gold? Yeah.
Well, more easily, because there would be fewer people that would resist that. Today, a lot of people still think that Bitcoin is just used by criminals because that's what the media likes to tell them. I guess I would bring up a few points on that. One is that governments have a super poor record of successfully banning anything. They can write on paper that you're not supposed to use it. I'm not aware of any time in history where that actually works. Murder itself is banned by the government, and yet people get killed all the time.
Okay, just one. Peter, question. Gold versus Bitcoin. Peter said that it's easier, in fact, for the government to outlaw Bitcoin use as money than to outlaw gold use.
I agree with that. It is easier to ban Bitcoin than it would be to ban gold because of popular sentiment.
Enforceability?
However,
enforceability?
It would be harder to enforce it. Right?
Okay, that's the key point.
If you have $10 million and you want to move it somewhere on Earth, if it is outlawed, that gold is probably not going to move. Or if it does, it's going to be a black market transaction that requires a huge amount of expense in order to do that, just as it would to get drugs across the border. I can send $1 billion of Bitcoin anywhere in the world without anyone knowing about it.
Yeah, but
So
the problem
the
is
enforceability is not
But the
even
problem
close.
is if it's illegal, no bank is ever going to convert it into a currency. So the person you send it to is going to have to keep it and only give it to somebody else who wants the Bitcoin. But then, of course, since you're doing this all over computers, governments are going to be able to track it down, figure out what address, what computer, figure the wallets out, and they can come and they can catch people. I mean, I think it's harder if somebody physically hands somebody a gold coin, unless the government is physically, following you around. That transaction is more in secret than something that's done over a computer network where government agents can be monitoring the transactions and trying to figure out, what's happened. So I think it will be easier to ban Bitcoin. But I want to mention one question on your gold that Gene brought up. Sure. It costs. I mean, the average mine to mine an ounce of gold now is, I don't know, $1,200, $11. I mean, it's expensive to mine gold. So if you thought gold was only worth $100 an ounce, nobody would be mining it. And so the only gold we would have to make anything, it would be the existing gold. And the price would have to go way up unless everybody was going to melt down their jewelry. If you wanted to make new jewelry, there'd be no new gold coming because nobody would mine it.
Especially since the government is sitting on 1 billion ounces, but they won't let it go, right?
Yeah, but so the point is there is some natural floor. I know, when you talk about the cost of mining Bitcoin, that's nothing than the cost. There is a real physical cost to extracting gold from the ground, and that also creates a base value for the metal because you just can't get it for free.
How many people? How much gold is held by investors and speculators? Just physical gold held by investors and speculators.
I don't know the quantity, but it's very
immense.
small.
Very small. Okay.
Compared to what they hold in stocks and bonds and stuff like that. It's tiny.
Compared to the gold supply, the above ground gold supply, how much is it?
That I don't know the exact amount.
No. Okay.
Do you know?
All right. Yes, I do. It's immense. But
well, how immense?
Well, it's about one third.
Well, one third? That's not that much.
One third of the entire gold supply.
So 2/3 is not being held by investors.
They would dump it all. They would dump it all on the market. But
what if all the big whales dump their Bitcoin? What percentage of Bitcoin is owned by the top 100 wallets? And how many of those wallets are owned by the same guy?
I was only trying to address your issue of intrinsic value of gold. It could be valued as a metal that you put in your teeth or the ornamental, but that's far less than its price. I'm surprised that you think the price of gold only responds to jewelry demand.
No,
a lot of people disagree with you.
I'm just saying that today there's very little investor demand for gold. I know, I sell it.
Yeah.
Sales are down like 80%. No one wants gold right now.
Peter is in a bad way with his business, and
Bitcoin's put me out of business.
He's getting $2,000 honorarium tonight, so that's going to keep the wolf from the door.
I am?
Yeah. You didn't know? Yeah.
No.
You won't.
I'll take it.
Oh, did you expect more?
In gold, Bitcoin, fiat, how am I getting paid?
Fiat dollars, only
All
fiat.
right, well, I didn't know that. Okay.
Okay. He's a happy man now. He didn't know that. Okay. Naomi, you got a question?
Yep. So just letting you know, I've sent you a bunch of online questions.
Yeah,
People
well,
have been submitting them.
I'm going to go through them. But what's your question?
My question is for both of you, actually. Now, Peter, would you be willing to take a Bitcoin versus gold bet with Erik Voorhees here tonight?
Well, I think he's already betting on it, and I'm betting against it. So I don't know what the point would be of the bet.
Put your money where your mouth is.
What bet did you have in mind?
Yeah, just you guys could figure out the details yourself, but essentially you would be shorting Bitcoin and maybe you would exchange the value. Like if you foresee that in the future gold is going to be worth less than the comparative prices between Bitcoin and gold at the moment, then you would owe each other the opposite whenever the bet ends.
I don't know. It's hard to agree on the exact terms because Bitcoin could go up before it goes down. I mean, I have no idea what bet you want to make.
No, I have a
You could throw one out there.
I have a time. Simple arbitrage. You go long Bitcoin and short gold. Peter goes long gold and short Bitcoin. And in 12 months, we pony up.
Well, that's a tough bet. I mean, Bitcoin could double any moment, then collapse to zero.
Eric, John Smith will take that bet. I know he will.
But the longer the time period, the more certain I am that I'm right.
36 months?
The shorter the time period, you just
Okay,
don't
no,
know,
this is one of those like classic Julian Simon bet.
You don't
How
know.
about 5 years? How about 5 years, Peter?
Yeah, I mean,
5
years, yes, 5 years. I think.
Okay, 60 months from now we're going to meet. and we're going to send the prices. It's a simple trade, and you're going to put up your entire honorarium, $2,000. And you'll put up your $2,000 honorarium.
As long as he doesn't put it up in Bitcoin. Put up,
Well, it's going to be a fair cut. We're going to arrange something. Very good suggestion, Naomi. We're going to work something out later. Next question.
Hi. So much of both your discussion has been about whether Bitcoin should or should not succeed in this idea. My question is, what would it take you to become convinced of the opposite of your view in terms of, for Erik, Bitcoin will not succeed, not should not, will not. Peter, Bitcoin will succeed, not should succeed. Thanks.
You got the question? Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Play devil's advocate a little
That's
bit.
a great question. Basically, what would it take for me to change my opinion that Bitcoin or some other cryptocurrency would replace fiat? If something better than cryptocurrency happened, right, like something that didn't use blockchains at all, but something that hasn't been invented yet that came along that seemed to be objectively better as a form of money, that could do it. Or if I think there was a 5 to 10 year period where the entire crypto market just slowly dwindled towards zero, I would have to assess during that time what was the reasons for that, but that might make me change my opinion. Short of that, these little bubbles that go up and down every few years, they don't bother me at all.
Yeah, no, I think it's interesting too, though, Erik. You'll acknowledge that cryptocurrency might ultimately succeed, but it may not be Bitcoin. It may be some other cryptocurrency.
Totally.
In which case, Bitcoin would be worthless.
Yeah, totally possible.
And for that very reason, I don't think any cryptocurrency will ever succeed, because I think if something can replace Bitcoin, then something will replace what replaces Bitcoin. Look, I mentioned earlier that Facebook replaced MySpace. In 2 years, Facebook will probably still be pretty big, but judging by the fact that a lot of younger people don't use it anymore, in 20 years, nobody might use it. Nobody knows, right, what's going to come up. And so Facebook shares, maybe they're a good speculation, but you're not going to use it as money. And as far as what could convince me, since I don't share your faith that the volatility will ever go away. See, Erik believes that at some point in time, even though Bitcoin is too volatile today to be money, that at some point in the future, it won't be volatile. I just can't make that leap of faith that the volatility is ever going to go away. I can't see that point. And I do think that if all the people who are holding Bitcoin ever got to the point where they actually thought it had topped out and was going to be stable, then they'd want to cash out. Now they'd want to start buying. You got all these people living in their parents' basements that are Bitcoin millionaires, and they have nothing because they're afraid to sell because they don't want to miss out.
Peter,
So I just can't, in my mind, see how it can ever stop going up or stabilize without collapsing as everybody tries to cash out.
Yeah. Okay. We need to get rid of this word faith here. Okay. The reason that people that are in crypto is not because of faith. It's because they've actually used it and they've seen it work. They've read the code. They understand what it's doing. It is an assessment of a technology based on people's opinions of that technology working and using it.
Some people,
Not
I think
faith.
a lot of people just own it because it's going up and they think they're going to get rich.
You can equally apply that to gold, especially after the financial
Not that
crisis.
many people think they're going to get rich in gold.
Not anymore.
And that's why you should be buying it. You don't buy what everybody else is buying.
Yeah, go ahead.
Both crypto and gold have a large degree of speculative froth around them, right?
No, there's no speculative. Are there some gold speculators? Yes. Is it frothy? Absolutely not. The froth is not in gold, right? There's a lot of froth in a lot of assets these days, whether it's stocks or bonds or cryptocurrencies. But believe me, there's no froth in gold.
No,
Wow.
I agree with that right now. There's not a lot of froth in gold right now, but there have been bubbles in gold, just as there are bubbles in crypto. And I don't think
Well,
it's
not
fair
this big, but yes, there have been periods of time, I think, where gold got overvalued. 1980 when it had gone up from $35 an ounce up to $850. It was, too high, and it pulled back, went into a long-term bear market. But not to the extent. The bubble that I think we've seen in cryptocurrencies, I think, is unparalleled. I mean, I think this is, when they write the history books and about bubbles, you have the popular delusions and madness of crowds. I mean, cryptocurrencies doesn't even need to be a chapter. It could be its own book. I think even if Bitcoin topped out at 20,000, it still the whole crypto thing might still be the biggest bubble we've ever seen. But it is possible that Bitcoin can make a new high. I'm not smart enough to know. So the bubble could, in fact, get even bigger.
If we looked at the price of Apple shares from the creation of that company up to today, it will have gone through bubbles and it will be at stratospheric heights compared to what it was back then.
Oh, bubbles, bull and bear markets, but not
Why
bubbles.
why is Apple's shares not a huge speculative bubble that will crash to zero, but Bitcoin is?
Well, the difference between a speculative bubble and just being overpriced, right? I mean, you can certainly make an argument that Apple is expensive, not based on its current price multiple. Based on that, Apple is relatively inexpensive. But the question is, can it maintain its dominance? Can it maintain its market share in a free market where everybody is gunning for it? Everybody's trying to outdo it and make a better product, right? Build a better mousetrap. What is the odds that Apple can continue to innovate at the rate of the past and the future, and that its market cap will continue to grow? Eventually, no, it's going to fall. The price is going to drop. But Apple, when you buy stock in Apple, you're buying into a company, you're buying into a revenue stream, you're buying all the physical and tangible assets and goodwill of the company. You get the dividend, you get, but when you buy Bitcoin, you're not buying into anything other than the hype and the potential that somebody else is going to pay a higher price, right? The whole bubble mentality is the greater fool. I'm going to buy it because some greater fool is going to pay me more. And that fool is going to buy it because he's expecting a greater fool to outbid him. Well, eventually you run out of fools, and you're the last fool, and that's it.
That's a great thing. Okay, we have Peter. A question from our vast live stream audience. This one that picks up on the other question by the hypothetical. The technology of gold mining. Let's say that gold does get recognized more and more as money, and it expands its price, doubles, triples, whatever. Are you saying that for all time, this intrinsic notion of yours that gold is always going to be expensive? Can they start mining it from asteroids? I've been told by some gold experts there's more gold in the ocean than we've ever mined in the history of the world. If technology takes off and we can suddenly double and triple the gold supply inside of a few months, what will that do to gold?
Well,
in terms of its scarcity?
The gold supply has been growing, for thousands of years.
What if there's a technological leap?
Look, we've had technological leaps.
Yeah.
We've already obviously mined the cheap gold. But look, is there gold in asteroids? Probably.
In the ocean.
I doubt.
In the ocean.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. I mean, maybe there's a lot of stuff in the ocean. I don't know what's down there.
There's more gold in the ocean. There's more gold in the ocean than there is anywhere else.
Go to the ocean and try to get it.
Okay.
But I mean, maybe
that's what people are going to do.
Look, maybe there's a way. Who knows what it's going to cost? Or as I started to say, maybe there's gold in asteroids. I doubt there's an asteroid that's solid gold. I mean, gold is very rare on Earth. It's probably rare all over the universe. And so if there's an asteroid that has some gold, there's probably not a lot of it. But believe me, if they're going to mine gold in asteroids, the price is going to be sky high because they're going to have to mine every last bit of gold on Earth before someone takes a spaceship up to an asteroid and tries to mine the gold up there and then bring it back down to Earth. I mean, that's going to be some expensive gold. And
There is an immense amount of gold in the ocean, just as a matter of fact. But that is your question. Yeah.
Yes, thank you so much. Just Gene, quickly, another great debate. Peter, awesome socks. I really love them. Okay, just a quick question for Erik. I have a coworker who prays at the altar of Bitcoin, and I asked him a basic question, and I don't think he answered it adequately, so I'll ask you. You might have touched on something that this could be, but potentially, what do you think is the main obstacle that can impede the growth or the health of Bitcoin?
Well, in Bitcoin's early years, the major obstacle impeding its growth was actually all the libertarians that couldn't see a good thing when it hit them. I think that's finally becoming a non-issue anymore. Bitcoin has grown much larger than the libertarian community around the world. And I think at this point, the biggest impediment to its adoption is simply that most individuals still want governments to manage money for them. Until that changes, Bitcoin, I think, will always be playing second fiddle. But I bet on Bitcoin largely because I know that the history of money is full of governments losing control over their fiats. And there has never been a financial crisis in which cryptocurrency actually existed. The next time that happens, I know where a lot of the people are going to be going. And so that's what I'm waiting for.
yeah, I think it's very interesting, that obviously the libertarian community, other than maybe criminals, were the first to embrace Bitcoin. But what's interesting is all of the properties that the libertarians found so appealing have actually been lost in the effort to bring more people into the bubble and mainstream it for the institutional investors. All the regulation, the government getting involved. I mean, now you want to open up an account, all the KYC of a bank account. They need your passport. They need your driver's license, a utility bill. The transaction costs have gone up. The government oversight. It's not now this thing that you're operating underneath the radar, right? You're free from the banking system and Big Brother watching your transactions. And gone are the days where it costs next to nothing to transfer, the Bitcoin because the transaction costs have gone up. So I think Bitcoin has lost a lot of that appeal in order to get the hedge funds involved and the big money in. And I think this is great for the libertarians who got in early, and now they have somebody to sell to. They can cash out. But if they actually stop and think, what Bitcoin has become is not what they originally embraced. It's something entirely different. It's what they argued against.
So totally disagree with that. Bitcoin has absolutely grown, and many more people are involved now than they used to be, and a much higher portion of those people are no longer libertarian types. And that's okay. That's kind of all part of the plan. To say that Bitcoin has lost its properties that made it useful in the beginning is simply not true.
Not really useful.
Well, hold on,
kind of
Peter.
attracted the libertarians to it. Now it's all the greed, and I'm going to get rich.
Okay, that has happened both in gold and crypto, so I don't think that that's any different there. There is no government in the world that knows how many Bitcoins I have. That was true in 2011, and it's true today, and it'll be true 10 years from now.
But gold has never been about getting rich. Gold is about not becoming poor, right? Gold is about preserving. Gold is about preserving wealth. It's a store of value. It is not a get-rich-quick scheme. People are not buying Bitcoin today to store anything or preserve anything. People are buying Bitcoin because they think the price is going to go up. So they're trying to accumulate wealth by owning Bitcoin. People buy gold in order to preserve the wealth they've already accumulated.
Okay.
Are you saying that there's not a single person that owns Bitcoin that did it for anything other than speculative fervor?
No, I'm saying initially a lot of people got in for all sorts of reasons. But I would say that most of the people who have bought Bitcoin in the last 6 months to a year, most of those people were motivated solely by profit.
Gold has never been about getting rich. Okay, but the question.
Well,
but the question.
If you're panning for gold in the ocean, you're trying to get rich. But
Okay.
if you're just
Okay. Fair enough. Okay.
You're buying it as a store of value, as a conservative way to
It's only what we saw in Deadwood. Okay, I agree with that. But the question. Okay, I'm sorry. A big final question. Could you finally address this question that Peter's challenged? The scarcity of Bitcoin. He said there's all these forks having to do with Bitcoin. So is Bitcoin only 21 million ounces, or is Peter right? With all those forks and whatever, there's a lot more than 21 million going to be involved.
There's only 21 million Bitcoin. There can never be more than
But what about the forks? The forks.
That's not Bitcoin. Just as silver is not gold, just as iron is not gold, Litecoin, Dash, and Monero were not Bitcoin.
Okay, unfortunately.
But there's no real difference. They all have the same property. I mean, there's a big difference between gold and silver.
Well,
Factually incorrect.
Okay. Unfortunately.
What can I do with? All right. Well, if I was on a desert island with my Litecoin, what could I do with it that I can't do with my Bitcoin?
You can do about as much as you could do with gold on a desert island.
No, I can do a lot with gold on a desert island.
Well, okay.
I can melt it into a bowl.
It's the old economist
eat some
joke.
Food that I find. I can bash something with it. You know.
Time for that economist joke. Assume we have a can opener. The economist on a desert island. But that aside, guys, you were great, and you are going to now finally be able to give the final bashing in the 5 minute of summation. And so, Peter, as the negative, you go last, and Erik has 5 minutes to sum up. Take it away, Erik. Take the podium.
All right, this has been fun. So I first learned about Bitcoin in 2011. I fell in love with it both as a fascinating economic experiment and as one of the greatest tools ever invented for the advancement of human liberty. I wrote an article in May of 2011 called Bitcoin and the Separation of Money and State. In that article, I asked, why are Bitcoins valuable? And I answered by saying that they simply possessed those attributes of money that are most desired. Bitcoin was $3, and almost nobody knew about it or cared about it. A year later, I wrote another article called Bitcoin, the Libertarian Introduction. This article pointed out that if a marketplace tends to choose the medium of exchange which best works as money, and Bitcoin's specific attributes make it excellent money, then perhaps the marketplace will, over time, increasingly use it for such. By then, Bitcoin had risen over 100% to $7. A year later, in May of 2013, I gave a speech at the San Jose Bitcoin Conference called The Role of Bitcoin as Money. Once again, I argued that Bitcoin's properties would lead it to keep gaining market share against fiat. By then, Bitcoin had risen more than 1,000% to over $150, clearly a bubble, as Peter said later that year. In December of that year, I got to have my first debate with Peter Schiff on his podcast. Yet again, I stated that the technology was immensely valuable and that Bitcoin's utility as an unblockable global payment network meant that it would keep growing. By then, Bitcoin had risen another 500% to over $800. Again, Peter called it a bubble, a beanie baby fad, a Ponzi scheme. He actually said that it was no better than fiat. Fast forward to today, even after the crash from December's frothy highs, Bitcoin is yet 800% higher still at $6,000. Every major financial institution and government in the world is studying this right now. This year's Davos may have well been called Blockchains, How Worried Should We Be? At what point do I get to call scoreboard here? This isn't some sci-fi future thing anymore. Crypto is currently pulling in the global financial system and restructuring it through a process of free market metamorphosis. And it is about damn time that we had free markets again. Look, I can sit here and tell you guys all the cool features of Bitcoin, which I have been doing for 7 years, but when it comes to the resolution being made tonight, there is really just one most critical point to understand, and that is this. Bitcoin cannot be debased. It cannot be debased, and it is now competing with the incumbent currency, US dollar fiat, which not only can be debased, but exists in a state of perpetual institutionalized debasement. This dynamic will encourage a virtuous cycle in which rational actors at the margins decide to hold the non-decaying form of money to the exclusion of that which decays. This is the primary reason gold itself has retained its position in society. It cannot be debased by governments either. When comparing two potential monetary alternatives, the one which is the hardest to debase is probably the one you should prefer, other factors being equal. But here the other factors aren't equal. One of them can also be transferred anywhere on Earth between any two people instantly at near zero cost and can't be shut down or censored. How's that for intrinsic value? But ignore for a moment every interesting advantage of Bitcoin. Ignore the ease with which one can send it. Ignore the censorship resistance. Ignore the universality, the fungibility, and the divisibility. Ignore the impossibility of counterfeit. True, Bitcoin surpasses US dollar fiat in all of these, but ignore those for a moment. focus purely on the mathematical fact that Bitcoin cannot be debased no matter how many guns a government wields, no matter how much propaganda it spews, or innocent people it imprisons. It does not matter how many meetings the Federal Reserve holds in its halls of chiseled marble. Every year, fiat oozes from the sewer of state. As a consequence, it has lost 98% of its value in the past 100 years. How foolish does one need to be to hold it over the next 100? Compared to gold, Bitcoin provides an efficient digital apparatus of payment and exchange that can enable commerce rather than hinder it. But more importantly, compared to fiat, Bitcoin bestows a gift for which humanity will grow increasingly hungry, an open, honest financial system that is under the control of no man, committee, or nation. Bitcoin will find its way into every tributary of economic activity, and with this gradual adoption, Bitcoin will come to replace fiat as the preferred money and medium of exchange for all sovereign people on Earth.
Well, as I admitted before, of all the bubbles that I have not participated in during my career, the one I most regret is Bitcoin. I mean, clearly, if there was ever a bubble that was tailor-made for me, that was the one, right? But just because the bubble has gotten bigger and bigger and bigger doesn't change the nature of what it is. And the fact that you are right now, that there is so much attention being paid to Bitcoin, that wasn't being paid to it when it was $3 a coin, but it is being paid to it now. I think back in December when it was making its peak and the futures were debuting, I was talking on my podcast and I decided to rename CNBC Crypto News Bitcoin, because that's all they talked about. It was nonstop. Of course, they won't have me on to criticize it. They won't have anyone on to criticize it. All they have is one person after another talking about how great it is and how it's going to keep going up. And I would suggest that when you have such mainstream, buying, that you've probably reached a peak. I mean, I brought my high school son here. He's got his friend here from high school, and they both own Bitcoin, although my son was smart enough to sell his. He sold his at 1900, so don't clap. But his friend still has his. But when the high school kids are buying it, look, it's not the bottom anymore. People still trying to tell me, it's the ground floor. Buy your Bitcoins now because they're going to $1 million. Look, I could, just because I didn't buy them at $3 or $50 or $1,000 or $5,000 doesn't mean I'm going to make the mistake of succumbing to the greed and buying into them now, because that's how all bubbles die. First you have the skeptics, they don't want to buy it, and then eventually they capitulate, they throw in the towel, their greed overwhelms them, and they buy in, and you make a top, and the market's going to collapse. And that's what's going to happen. I have a pretty good track record of seeing these bubbles, whether it's in the real estate market or the .com market. I mean, if it looks like a bubble, quacks like a bubble, walks like a bubble, it's a bubble. You talk about debasing, that Bitcoin can't be debased. The whole term debasement comes from taking a precious metal and coin and then putting a base metal into it, so you don't really get as much gold as you thought you were getting because you've got some lesser metal instead. Well, you can't debase Bitcoin because there's nothing to debase. There's no value there to start with. It doesn't matter if you had some other cryptocurrency because you've got nothing. And it doesn't matter, whether, I don't have all the Bitcoin that I thought I have, because at the end of the day, there's nothing there. I don't think that the current fiat system will withstand the test of time. I mean, fiat money has been tried and failed all throughout history. I don't think this giant experiment is going to succeed any better. As Erik mentioned earlier, we've only been on this fiat system since 1971, when the U.S. went off the gold standard, and prior to that, we convinced everybody to be on a dollar standard. But the reason the world held dollars was because the dollar was backed by gold, and not only backed by gold, but convertible on demand into gold. And so I think this experiment is going to end. It has done incredible amounts of damage. So I think it's going away, but I don't think we're going to go to Bitcoin or any of these other fiat cryptocurrencies. I think we will go back to where we were. I think the dollar will once again be backed by gold at some point, at some exchange rate, and maybe there will be private companies that will compete with governments by issuing cryptocurrencies backed by something. I happen to think it's best to back them by gold, but somebody could back them by some other commodity. As long as you have money that's backed with something of stable, reliable value, that you can relate to other goods and services, then it could be the basis of medium exchange. I mean, modern technology does make it easier. Today, I would think that gold today, with the technology that exists, is easier for gold to function as money than at any point in human history. And that is the real advancement that we have. Whether it's blockchain or anything else, it's the ability to digitally transfer stored gold around the world, right? That's what is the evolution or the advancement of money. It's the improvement on what works. You don't need to reinvent something that works. Gold has worked as money since it was first created. In fact, the most prosperous period in American history was when we were on the purest gold standard in American history. And I think that hopefully America will re-embrace that monetary heritage once again, and hopefully the rest of the world will also enjoy the benefits of sound money and move off of the constant booms and busts associated with fiat money. And I think it's ironic that one of the booms and busts is in Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies. And I think that the crypto bubble is going to pop before the overall fiat bubble pops. And if anything, it actually might end up achieving the opposite of its purpose, because it actually might succeed in doing the one thing that you shouldn't be able to do. It'll actually succeed in making fiat money look good. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, Peter. Thank you, Eric, for your superb insights. Again, the resolution reads, Bitcoin or a similar form of cryptocurrency will eventually replace government's fiat money as the preferred medium of exchange. And so we're going to open the final vote. We are ready to close the vote, so could you bring me the results? And I will give it the Oxford style. Okay. All right. The resolution was, again, Bitcoin will eventually replace government's fiat money as a preferred medium of exchange. The yes votes started at 40% and rose to 55% in the final. So, Eric, your side, Eric, picked up 15 points. That's the number to beat. Peter did not beat that number. Went from 40% a little bit down to 31. So, Eric, you got the Tootsie Roll. Congratulations.